All right, so again, we're here for talking to kids, body safety, boundaries, and consent. So just as a reminder for those who just came in, this event is going to be recorded. And the reason that we are doing that is that we want to be able to listen to the recording this evening. So participation in this event means that you are consenting to being recorded. We did go ahead and mute everyone's microphones, but if you don't want your face to be recorded, feel free to not turn on your camera, and that we will be posting the recordings to the YWCA Delaware Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So you can look out for that if you'd like to listen to this again. So I just really quickly want to go over the Sexual Assault Response Center, which is where I work. So we serve primary and secondary survivors that are age 12 and up who have experienced sexual and/or domestic violence statewide. We have offices in Newark, which you can see at the bottom on Chestnut Hill Road, and we also have an office in Georgetown, which is where I am the counselor. We have a 24/7 helpline that we operate. With a number there. We have individual and group counseling, aftercare and case management, and accompaniments to hospital, police, and court for issues related to victimization, whether that be sexual violence or domestic violence. And individuals can get connected to our services through that helpline number. So we're going to go ahead. Well, let me back up and introduce who I am. So I am, again, the counselor in the Georgetown office. So I see both teenagers and adults who have been impacted by sexual and domestic violence. I'm also a mom, which I think gives me a little bit of street cred to be able to talk about this a little bit. I have a 2-year-old little boy and an almost 5-year-old little boy. So I'm coming at you with two hats on today. So I'm professional and also a mom as well. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll because I really want to get a sense of how comfortable individuals on the phone or on the computer already are with talking to the children in your life about these concepts. That doesn't have to be your own children or your own grandchildren, but any children that you interact with.
And if anyone is unable to click in the poll, if you want to give us your response in the chat.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the chat on my box so I can see. All right. So it looks like we have a couple more people who haven't responded. We can go ahead and close the poll now. We have about 45 saying they're very comfortable and 55% saying they're somewhat comfortable. So it's interesting that you guys signed up for this talk today. So we'll see. Maybe you guys can teach me a little something too. There. So I just wanted to kind of touch on some key concepts. And I wrote these in the way that I would talk to little kids about them. So these aren't your scholastic definition from your dictionary, but these are the ways that I would talk if I was talking to little kids. So the term body safety, I really just mean that your body is yours, right? So that's an umbrella term that incorporates things like boundaries and consent as well. Boundaries are those rules, guidelines, limits. With even littler kids, I might talk about it being like an invisible space or a bubble around you, right? And that people have to get permission to be able to come into your space or your bubble. And then consent, really simply asking for permission and permission being given willingly, right? And I think that it's important to know that these conversations that we have with young people are ongoing and continuous. This is not a one time, you check a box and everything is good. Um, these are concepts and ways that we interact with the young people in our lives that teach them really important messages about how they get to control what happens to their body, and that although that we are the adults and we have, obviously more knowledge and more experience and things like that, that when it comes to things related to their body and things like that, that they are really the ones that are in control of that. And I think it's really important to start young. um, I, I have, like I said, I have a 2-year-old. These are already things that I'm talking about with him. We're not talking about sex, for obviously, but we are talking about those messages of, if your brother doesn't want to play with you, that's okay, right? And how to navigate that. Um, and really simple age appropriate messages. So we're going to go through, I know this was on the description when you signed up. So, I think that parents and caregivers, grandparents, professionals sometimes get overwhelmed with how to really broach topics like boundaries and consent with little people, right? How do I take this concept that is really big, and sometimes I don't fully, like wrap my head around, how do I take that and interpret that for a little mind, right? And I just really wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that there are a lot of resources that are available to help make these conversations easier. So I just chose this one. This is a book by Janine Sanders, No Means No. And I think it does a pretty decent job of kind of going through these big picture concepts and breaking them down for little people to understand. I would say that you would probably want to wait until they were 3 to 4 before introducing a book like this. Not that there's anything confused or not age appropriate. It's just that I think that the concepts would be better used for someone that's 3 to 4. I read this book to my 5-year-old. He fully understood. We had great conversation about it, good dialogue afterwards. And that's exactly what I would use this book for, as a conversation starter, right? This is not the checking of the box, right? This is a way to start the conversation and to make it a little easier to have these conversations with your kids. I do really like the book, and we're going to get into the content of the book, but the book does a really good job at portraying that most abusers of little children of sexual abuse are known to the child, right? So you'll see in throughout the book that all of the people that are in the book are known to the children. This is not a scenario where it's the guy in the bush, right? The stereotypical image of what child abuse or child sexual abuse looks like. And so I really like that about this book. Some things I don't love about the book is that there isn't really great diversity. So the family that is featured in the book is Caucasian, or appears to be at least, and it's a heterosexual parent coupling. So we have a dad and a mom, and there's not really many imagery of people of color. There is one section that shows people of color, and it kind of does a not great image of those of people of color. So you'll see when we get into it, and I will discuss it a little bit more during that time. But just know that no book is going to be perfect, and it's not always going to meet all of our needs. But take the pieces that work for you and your family, or you and your kids in your life, and leave the rest. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get into the book now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. Everybody can see me again? Okay. All right. So again, this is the cover of the book. No means no. All right. I'm going to sit like this, hopefully, so you can see. When Aunt Jeannie asks me for a kiss and I don't want to, No means no. I can choose to blow her a kiss, shake her hand, or give her a high five. But if I don't want to hug her or kiss, no means no. So we're just going to pause there for a moment. I think that, this topic of hugging a family member, kissing a family member, I think it's of particular importance around the holidays. You may have experienced this if you have children in your life. We tend to be around family or close friends that we don't see a lot of the time, and our children are not nearly as comfortable with them as we are. And I think it can be really common for, a character like Aunt Jeannie, who may not be super well known to the child, but someone that you know pretty well, to ask for a hug or kiss from your child. And I think, it's important to kind of have these conversations and to be clear with your partner if you're, in that kind of in a relationship with someone, that kids shouldn't have to give a hug or a kiss to a family member that they don't feel comfortable doing so. I think it's also important to note that kids are not always going to verbalize that they're uncomfortable or feeling unsafe. So if you recall back in the book, the little girl doesn't actually say at any point that she doesn't want to hug Aunt Jeannie, but you can see by her body language that she's kind of pulling back, right? And I think that then becomes our job as the adults in this child's life, to read that body language and to really advocate on their behalf, on behalf of the child. I really like the idea of giving options to kids. So how about a high five? Or how about a hug instead of a kiss? And, really having the child kind of lead what that looks like. I know my kids will pretty much never pass up a high five. They think it's really cool. So I can usually, get them on board with a high five instead. What I think is also important to note in this book is that the adult, Aunt Jeannie, in this situation is okay with the different kind of contact, right? So she just says, okay, that's fine. I think it's important to note that the other adults in your child's life may not be okay. Like they really may not understand why your kid doesn't want to give them a hug or a kiss, right? They may not fully understand that, and they may take it personal or get defensive. So I think that's, it's important to think about how you will handle that ahead of time. And it's an opportunity for us to really support and advocate for our children. Because I really, when we think about what the message is when we push the child to do something that they're uncomfortable with, we're really sending the message that they should ignore how they feel, right? They should ignore that they feel uncomfortable or unsafe with this physical contact, that they don't get to decide what happens to their body, and that the other adults' feelings are more important than their own, right? So that's really the messages that we're sending when we don't allow children the right to have the kind of contact that they're comfortable with. And then if we're thinking about this in terms of professional relationships, and not maybe your own children, if you are a doctor or a nurse, really saying, hey, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if, really giving the child the option of what that physical contact has to look like, right? If you need to do an exam, kind of giving the child as many options about what that looks like as possible. Okay. If you have, I just wanted to know, if you have any questions that come up during this time, you can type them in the text chat, and Megan will be monitoring that, and she'll pause me if we feel like we need to go over that immediately. Okay. So we're going to go to our next part of the book here. When it's bath time and my mother asks if she can wash and dry my private parts, and I say, no thanks, I can do it all by myself. No means no. I can wash and dry my own private parts today, tomorrow, or the next day, because my body is my body and I am the boss of it. So, this is, again, the adult is asking in this scenario, would you like to dry yourself off, or can I do it for you? Um, Again, that's not always going to happen. I think it's ideal um, that adults are asking children what they would like to see happen during this time. They refer to private parts, which um, if I'm explaining that to a kid, I would say private parts are those areas that are covered by a bathing suit. Most kids can understand that. That's usually pretty age appropriate for most little kids. But I think it's really, really, really important that little kids know proper names for body parts, right? That we don't just refer to them as private parts or have the cutesy names that sometimes we use to talk about penis and vagina or vulva or those other areas. It's really important that little kids understand what those body parts are called, and that they're private, and that the only people that should be touching or looking at them are you as a parent, and then in some circumstances, doctors and medical professionals. And I know that can feel uncomfortable for some people. Some parents don't really love using correct body part names. Because we're, fearful that our kid's gonna find a cool new word that they're gonna say over and over and over again in the middle of church. And that'll be embarrassing for us. But the reason that is so important is because there have been scenarios, and this is taught in other, professional trainings, that if kids do not know the correct body parts as their names, if something were to happen, like sexual abuse, and they do tell an adult or other professional that something happened, and they use a name like cookie, for example, to refer to a body part, or purse, I think is the example that is used in the Stewards of Children training. They may not, if it's not your child, you may not understand that that's what they're telling you, right? So if a child says, so and so touched my purse, you may not understand at all that that is related to sexual violence or sexual abuse. So that's why it's really, really, really important that we teach our kids the correct names of their body parts. And it's really empowering for them too, to really understand how their body works and what this body part does and things like that. Again, age appropriate. What I really also like about this section about bath time is that the parent respects the choice of the child, right? There's not pushback. There's not, well, come on, it's easier or faster if I just do it for you, right? I like that the parent accepts the child's response. And that really what you're doing is you're modeling for your kid how to navigate the no answer, right? It's showing your child that if you ask somebody to do something and they say no, that we have to respect that answer, right? And that is really setting the stage for what consent looks like throughout their life. There will be a time where your child will be on, or the child in your life will be on the receiving end of a no, right? And it's really important that your child understands that receiving no doesn't mean I just need to ask harder or ask more times or keep pushing until I get the answer I want. I'll give you an example. My kids like to watch YouTube video or videos on their Kindles together. So they will sit next to each other and they'll watch videos together. But it's only on their own terms, right? Like when they want their brother to watch with them, then everything is cool. But when they want to watch by themselves, it's really hard to hear no. So, that's something that we are working on in our family, is how to navigate when you're told no. Like you want to sit and watch something with your brother, but he said no. And we have to just accept that's his answer. So it's always a learning process for sure. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next section. So we can build a giant sand castle in the sand. Oh, I think I skipped a page. Sometimes my big cousin looks after me. We run races and have fun on the swings. But if he wants to wrestle and play tickling games and I don't want to, no means no. We can build a giant sandcastle in the sand or play catch with a ball. But if I don't want to wrestle or play tickling games, no means no. So again, the child gets to have the choice about what play and physical contact looks like. I think that, this is an important thing to bring up is tickling, right? So when it's a parent or a grandparent and you're tickling a child or a grandchild, it's all fun and games. And obviously your intentions are pure, right? You don't have malicious intentions when you're doing that with your child or your grandchild. But it's important to have your child understand that when he says or she says no, that you're going to stop that behavior, right? That if you're tickling them and it's fun and everyone's laughing, but they say no, that you're not going to keep going. It's an important message that we teach to young people that when they say no, that no should be respected by everyone and not just, it should be respected by everyone, including our parents and our grandparents and everyone else in our life. Tickling can also be a primary form of grooming that people who want to sexually abuse or sexually harm children sometimes use tickling and other forms of play as a way to get on the child's good side, like everything is safe and fine. But then that can quickly escalate into things that are not safe and not fine. So just a quick note about tickling. And that I think what else is important in this little part is that just because they're older and or if they're in a position of authority, meaning this cousin who is babysitting this child at this time, doesn't mean that they can't be told no, right? So your child should be taught that doesn't matter if it's an adult or someone in a position of authority, a coach, a teacher, a babysitter, that when they say no, that no should be respected. When someone asks to hold my hand at school and I want to walk all by myself, no means no. Sometimes I like to walk by myself and I don't want to hold anyone's hand. I can say, no thanks, or not today, as kindly as I can. So this is the part that I was talking to you about as far as racial diversity and people of color. I wish that the only reference to people of color in this book was not a young Black boy trying to hold a little white girl's hand. I wish that was not the only reference to people of color. But I think that because this is the only scenario in this book in which it's a non-family member, then that's where she tried to use more diversity. So just a note there, I just wanted you to be aware of that, as you're using this with people, children in your life. So again, this is an example of non-family contact, but again, this little boy obviously goes to school with her and is a known contact. So really, again, demonstrating that idea that most abusers of children are known to them, about 85%. I think that this would be a good time to distinguish contact between safe contact, meaning contact where a child needs to hold your hand to cross the street, for example. So that would be contact that's not negotiable, right? Like we have to hold your hand when we're crossing the street because that's a safety issue. This is obviously a different scenario where he wants to hold her hand on the playground, right? So having, walking through those distinguishing factors with little kids is important too. And then we have one more section. When people ask me things and I say no, I don't mean maybe and I don't mean I'm not sure. What I really mean is no. So even though I may be small, I am strong and I have a voice that is loud and clear. So when I say no, no means no. So, what I really like about those last few pages is that the family is supportive. So you can see the family is there and they are supportive of the little girl standing up for herself and being assertive. I really love that. I love that it kind of distinguishes coercion from consent. So no does not mean maybe or I'm not sure. No means no. And that is a distinct separation between coercion. And then I love that she's in her little superhero pose at the end, because we really have a lot of evidence that standing in that pose can really boost your confidence. And I really love that. I think that's something really important that you should teach your kids as well. That when they're feeling uneasy or unsafe, that standing in that superhero pose can sometimes give them a lot more confidence that maybe they didn't have before. Okay. So I just want to pause here and invite you to put in the text chat if you have any questions that are specific to the book, and we will go ahead and try to answer those. I do have a lovely comment from Megan that although the main character in this book is a girl, I think that these messages are really important to be shared with both girls and boys. So like I shared in the beginning, I have 2 little boys, and I think it's just as important for me to be talking to them about body safety and boundaries and consent than it would be as if I had a little girl. We know that little girls and little boys are both sexually abused. I think 1 in 5 little girls and 1 in 8 little boys. But also we're sending the messages on the other side too, right? So when they grow up and they are in, adult relationships and they're navigating consent in the way that we typically think about consent, meaning sexual consent, that they already have this groundwork laid, right? Like you've already laid the foundation for them for what it feels like to be told no, right? How to navigate that, because it doesn't feel good to be told no. Like, I don't know about you, I don't like to be told no either. So, teaching our kids and helping them to work through those feelings in a way that is supportive and engaging and open-ended, right? Like we're continuing to have these conversations with our kids. Do I think that, so I just got this book, right? So I've been doing these things with my kids, making sure that they don't have to hug anyone they don't feel comfortable with, making sure I give them options, making sure that they know that, if I'm tickling them and they say no, then I'm going to stop, right? Like those are all things that I've been doing along the way. I just happened to find this book, and I feel like it does a really good job at making those conversations easier and more accessible for people who maybe don't have the background knowledge that maybe I do as a counselor working with people who've experienced this. And the book is available in Spanish. I found it pretty quickly on Amazon, so if you are needing it in another language, I would suggest you look there. And then the author, Janine Sanders, has a ton of great resources on her website, and she has several of the handouts and posters that accompany this book in various languages, not just Spanish. So a whole slew, I think there was maybe 8 to 10 different languages that the posters came in. So a really great resource if you were looking for them. So I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and hop back on over to the presentation, because there's a couple more points I want to make sure that we get before we move on. So I would suggest that you talk to children about what it feels like to be safe or uncomfortable, like what it feels like in their body, right? So have them kind of brainstorm. What do they feel like when things feel unsafe? Like, do they have like a pit in their stomach? Are their hands or palms sweaty? Do they feel like it's hard to breathe? Like they got an elephant on their chest? Really talk to the kids about what that feels like, right? Because we want to empower them with the skills and the knowledge to be able to recognize when this is an unsafe situation, right? Because if it's Uncle Joe, who he's been around, your child has been around several times, and everything's been fine, and then at one point it's not fine, and there's an uncomfortable or unsafe scenario, you want your child to be able to recognize that for what it is. And then again, when that child recognizes that something's safe or uncomfortable, that they have an established safety network or support system. So I would suggest you come up with 3 to 5 different people in the child's life that they feel like they can go to if they are feeling unsafe or uncomfortable. What I really like to do with little kids is they have, 5 fingers. So have them go through each of their fingers and identify a person for each of those fingers so that they can remember, okay, I got my mom is my, pinky finger. My ring finger is dad. I got my grandma, Janine. I got my grandpa and uncle or teacher or a medical professional. Really kind of go through with them, and they can remember if you if you go through your 5 fingers, and you keep reiterating that with them, keep supporting that, then they will remember when needed. I also want to point out the difference between secrets and surprises. So although adults tend to use those words interchangeably, they do not mean the same thing. And it's important to explain to little kids the difference. So surprises are awesome and great, and those are birthdays and those are parties and all of the fun stuff. Secrets, not so good, right? So secrets are what people who are potentially abusing children like to use. So this is just a secret between me and you. You don't have to tell mom and dad. This is just a secret. This is a special thing. To really help your children understand what are the differences between secrets and surprises. Surprises are fun and exciting. Secrets are not. And surprises are always okay to be told at some point, right? There is a time difference, or time, end to surprises. Secrets are not. So important to kind of go over the difference between that and to make sure that you're using the correct language when you're talking to the kids, right? So if you're planning a surprise party for dad for his 40th birthday, make sure we're using the correct surprise and not it's a secret, right? So that we don't confuse little kids. I really suggest what if. So meaning going through scenarios with kids. They learn best. That's why this book is really great, because it kind of goes through some specific scenarios that the kid might encounter. They can't, little kids are not going to understand an abstract concept. You have to break it down for them. We have to give them real life examples. What would you do if this happened? Who would you tell if this happened? And you're not grilling your kid. You're just having a conversation, right? This is, you read the book and you have a conversation afterwards. I did want to mention, I forgot to mention that in the back of this book, there are discussion questions for parents and caregivers and educators. And really what those are sample questions that you can use to kind of get more information or to share a little bit more, kind of have more of a dialogue with your child. Navigating those gray areas. So it's not all black and white, right? We can tell kids that no one should touch their private parts. And then we're like, oh, well, wait, because you have a physical exam later this week. So actually someone, so there are gray areas that we have to navigate. And we really have to kind of break those down for kids so they understand why these are gray areas. Again, I would recommend going through scenarios, but also I like the concept of things that keep you clean, healthy, and safe are generally okay. So if it's the doctor and he needs to make sure that everything is going okay as far as, your growth and development, that's you keeping you healthy. If it's, you're a year and a half and you still wear diapers, right? That's keeping you healthy and clean, right? If it's we're crossing the street and you need to hold my hand and that's not negotiable, that's to keep you safe, right? Again, that's not without fault, right? Like there are flaws in that explanation, and I understand that. But again, that's where coming back to those scenarios is really important, and kind of walking the kids through things that they may encounter that are in those gray areas. And then I do recommend that you kind of go over internet safety if you have older children. There are tons of resources online, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about that. We are very much in a digital age now. If we thought we weren't before, we very much are now, with kids doing, their school on Zoom and things like that. And, I'm sure that many of us have heard about Zoom bombing and people who are unsafe or unfamiliar to children kind of hopping onto Zoom calls without invitation. And so it's really important to kind of go over that internet safety. My kids are too young for that, 2 and 5. But we do talk about YouTube. We talk about how there are some videos on YouTube that are not safe for little kids, and that's why they aren't allowed to have free access to YouTube. So you keep it age appropriate. But I definitely recommend, especially now with everyone doing so much online these days. And Megan's going to talk a minute about something, teen tech safety video.
Okay, so since we're wrapping up our Sexual Assault Awareness Month with talking about body safety, boundaries, and consent for kids, we're also doing then, hopefully next week, if not the week after, if technology is not with us, but we're going to be recording a very short, very quick little video for teens and college students with some digital resources, organizations for tech safety, protecting their device, and sort of safety planning in unhealthy relationships. That's not going to be a live event. It's going to be one that we're just recording. And again, it will be posted and shared once we have that. So that will be coming down the line.